Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just about 2 minutes. We're going to give time for everyone to get logged in. In the meantime, if you want to say where you're calling in from in the chat box, that would be great, and we will get started in just a minute. Thank you.
Cape Girardeau, Washington, D.C., Harrisburg. Wow, all over the place.
All right, we are going to get started as others are dialing in. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Kevin and the Alliance for Audited Media, for the webinar this afternoon. I know it's going to be great, the state of digital advertising. Just a few housekeeping items. We will use the chat box like we're using it right now to say where we're dialing in from, to provide feedback, to interact with other attendees. If you have any questions for Kevin, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom webinar panel. You can put in any questions you have for him there, and I will be monitoring that throughout the webinar, and we will answer all of your questions at the end. So use the chat to talk, provide feedback, but if you have questions for Kevin, please use the Q&A. We will be recording the webinar, and you will be receiving a link of the recording as well as the presentation directly from Kevin and the Alliance for Audited Media at the conclusion of the webinar, so probably tomorrow. So anyway, with that, welcome, Kevin. Thank you for being here, and we're excited to get started.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, LMA, for the opportunity, and thank all of you, for hopping on here for a little bit and talking digital with us. This is always a fun conversation I like to have with folks, especially in the news media community. There's a lot going on here, so there's a lot of grounds to cover. I like to pack these with a lot of examples, real world examples. So we can go ahead and get started. Lindsay, anything else to add, or can we are we ready to go?
We're ready to go.
All right, great. So what's the state of digital advertising right now? I'm assuming that you're on this webinar because you're involved in digital advertising in some way, shape, or form. That means that you're making bundles of money right now, right? What a great time to be in digital advertising, never been better. According to all the headlines, everything is fantastic. Everybody's making a killing in digital, and we're all doing really well. And this is all, we can all just kind of kick up our feet and let the money pour in, right? Unfortunately, that's not quite the case. And there's a few good reasons why, and a lot of reasons why, but a few really good ones. One of them being what we'll be talking here at length a little bit more about in a minute. And that's a problem with digital advertising, that a number of dollars are leaking off in the realm of digital ad fraud. And there are a number of headlines pretty much every week. A new scam is uncovered that's siphoning money off from quality publishers and advertisers and going into bad actors. But kind of before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about the state of digital advertising. So what's our universe? The total amount spent in digital advertising in the United States in 2020 will be $191 billion with a B, billion. Next year, pretty much every analyst is saying that it will eclipse $200 billion. There was some concern when COVID hit that, oh boy, this is going to induce a bubble in digital advertising. It's been going up so quickly that there's going to be a crash here, and we're going to see a dial back on digital advertising. And there was, but it was commensurate with the rest of the advertising landscape. What we saw in Q3 and Q4 in particular were those ad dollars that were sitting on the sidelines. It came flooding back into the market, into digital advertising. In fact, in Q4, the growth was 29%. So, a good way of looking at this in 2020 in particular, that was the first year. If you take all the other forms of advertising, if you take TV, radio, outdoor, digital advertising eclipsed all of those forms of advertising combined. Every other form of advertising did not get as much revenue as digital advertising did in 2020. That was the first year that digital ad revenue eclipsed all the other forms of advertising combined. And of course, the trajectories of those particular silos, it's digital, of course, is on the way up, and it tends to be taking from a lot of those other forms of advertising. Programmatic spend in particular, that grew by 25% in 2020. So I know many of you on this webinar are in programmatic environments. You're selling your remnant inventory there. Your programmatic CPM grew by 25% too, right? That went up by 25%. I can't hear you, but I'm imagining I'm hearing some muffled laughter at that. A good example for this would be the housing market. Really, you have X amount of inventory that isn't really going up, but you have a substantially growing number of people that want to buy a house. That, of course, drives up prices of homes. Anybody who's bought a house in the last year or two can attest to the fact that the price of homes is skyrocketed in some cases. In the higher quality zip codes and the more sought after zip codes, it's gone up even more. That should, I'm not an economist, but in a macroeconomic sense, that should be following suit in the programmatic environment, because especially here in the United States, you have X amount of eyeballs. Now, those eyeballs are not really going up. That inventory of eyeballs is not going up very much, but the amount of dollars that want to reach those eyeballs is going up. So why is your programmatic CPM not increasing at the rate with which the revenue is increasing? Now, I don't profess to know all the answers, but I think we have some reasons why here coming up, and some things we can do about it too. If we look at the state of digital advertising and digital ad fraud, it's a $200 billion a year revenue stream. However, 35 billion annually is siphoned off to digital ad fraud. 35 billion translates to roughly $100 million a day siphoned off to ad fraud. $100 million a day. Now, I don't want this to just be numbers on a screen, so let's kind of put this into terms. Now, we all do a lot of streaming nowadays. We all watch a bunch of shows. I just wrapped up last week watching a Netflix documentary series called Heist. Some of you maybe you've seen it. I think it's 6 parts. It covers 3 different crimes or 3 different heists. One of them was a group of friends who decided that they were going to knock off a armored car, one of those money cars in Las Vegas. Another one was an airport heist in Miami Airport. And then the third one was Pappy Gate, which was a small group of friends who were working at a distillery in Kentucky. And it was right at the beginning of the bourbon craze. So they had all these bottles of bourbon that weren't really very secure. And the cost was going up and up and up. So it was a fantastic opportunity for them to flip that, sell it. I totaled up the total amount of money stolen for this Netflix documentary for these 3 heists. It was, I believe, about $12 million. To put that into terms of digital ad fraud, $12 million, which it took years of these people's lives to come up with these schemes, to execute them. Thousands of hours of law enforcement chasing them down, catching them. 3 hours worth of digital ad fraud, $12 million. In the amount of time it takes for you to go through this webinar, about $4 million will be siphoned off from the digital advertising environment in the form of fraud. And there's no arrests for digital ad fraud. There's no Netflix documentaries. There's really not a lot of attention on it. In fact, the amount of money that's lost to digital ad fraud is now higher than what is lost to credit card fraud. Now, we all know, or maybe we ourselves have been victims of credit card fraud, or at least attempted credit card fraud, or I'm sure we all know people that have become victims of credit card fraud. And it's especially easy now because it's pretty scalable online. Not nearly as scalable as ad fraud, but these credit card companies, they have entire floors of full-time employees that are working full-time around the clock to try to stop credit card fraud. You don't really see that kind of attention given to digital ad fraud. And what it ends up happening is it affects the advertisers who are losing their money. but it also affects the quality publishers who should be getting that money as well. And that money kind of, it follows, the bad actor money kind of follows the money around the internet. So right now, the highest CPM out there for digital advertising is CTV, that's connected television. A lot of us have that now, most of us do. When you buy TV, the first thing that it wants to do is connect to the internet so that it can begin to stream your Netflix and your Hulus and your Disney Pluses and all that. And then what those apps do, Peacock in particular, I noticed does this because maybe it's just the plan I'm on with Peacock, but I was just watching Yellowstone, which is a fantastic show. Everybody should check it out. It's a great show. I think a new season is coming up. Kevin Costner's in it. 3 or 4 times in that hour episode, they inject ads into it, and those ads are targeted towards who Peacock believes is watching it. Maybe they've pulled enough information to know that it's probably me doing it, maybe through credit card information or how the account is set up. But then they sell kind of in a real-time environment. They sell that advertisement, that 20-second or 15-second spot. They can sell that for a lot of money because they know that video, that digital video impression is being served on a 60-inch TV, 70-inch TV, 80-inch TV, and you can't skip it. So it's being played in the living room. You can't skip it. It takes up a lot of real estate. And it's essentially taking the place of primetime television commercials. So it's a very valuable spot. So the fraudsters are following the money of the CTV. I'll have an example for that a little bit later. But really, ad fraud comes in a lot of different varieties. I like to say that ad fraud it's like flavors of ice cream. Some of them are more popular than others, but there are dozens of different flavors of ice cream. There's dozens of different kinds of ad fraud. One of the most common or vanilla types of ad fraud would be the example that I have on the screen right now. And that's simply creating a website that has a bunch of gibberish on it, or maybe it's meant to look like a legitimate news website. And then, of course, humans aren't going to that website because it's gibberish or it's old content or it doesn't make sense. So the owners of those websites then go out and they purchase fake traffic. They purchase bot traffic that is meant to look like real traffic. What that does is it raises the traffic levels high enough so that they can begin to be listed in programmatic environments and exchanges. If those bots are good enough and they're clean enough, then they're going to look like humans and they're going to be able to list in the same environments that many of you quality publishers who pay millions of dollars a year for journalists, editors, copy people, just the entire user interface, the entire user experience that you're paying for. They don't have any of those expenses. They just go out there and slap together these websites, run through bots, and then they get to list in the exact same places that many of you are trying to sell advertising. And they don't care what they get for their advertisements because they're all bogus anyway. So they're throwing spaghetti at the wall and they'll just drive down the cost. It's all profit to them. So then they run ads on it. So, if you think this is all just theoretical and isn't really happening, in May 2020, a CNBC reporter who really self-professed, did not know a whole lot about the internet and how to set up websites and do things, they were able to go out and do this exact same thing on their own, not being experts in the dark web. And to kind of further that example, here are a couple websites that were actually caught doing exactly that. They're meant to look like local news websites. At first glance, they look like a local news website. They're set up tiled like local news. But when you take a deeper dive into it, or even just not even deep, but just cursory glance at it, clicking around, you start seeing that the stories don't really make sense. They're old. It's stock images. No human would spend more than 2 minutes on this website and they would never go back to it ever again. But thanks to bot traffic, they're able to list in those environments and compete for advertising dollars with many of you. Now, in this particular case, this is particularly egregious, I would say, because after the scheme was uncovered, I checked back upwards of, I want to say maybe 3-4 months after this was uncovered, these websites were still up and they were still serving. These screen grabs that I took from these websites were months after the headlines came out that these websites are fake. Now, I don't know to what extent they were still serving fake traffic or sending it through, or who had turned them off and on as far as advertising environments and blacklisted them. But the websites were still listed, and they still served ads to me. So let's take a look kind of on the traffic side of things. You think, okay, well, to get fake traffic that's different. I don't know how to get bots out of a data center and send them to a website that has to be very specialized. It really isn't. If any of you are familiar with the website Fiverr, I've used it a bunch of times myself. Fiverr is a great website. It's based on gig economy. It's not dissimilar to Uber's business model. It allows people, so say you have a particular skill, you're great with Photoshop. You can set up a profile on Fiverr and you can sell services on Fiverr, very specific services. So say you just clean up LinkedIn profiles. You can take a LinkedIn picture and say someone has a picture that they want as their LinkedIn profile. They look very professional, but it was taken with a distracting background. So you can go on Fiverr and for $5, $10, $20, you can pay someone to go and clean up that and Photoshop that. So a user can go in there and they can sell particular services for not a lot of money. And then, folks can go in there and get some pretty cool stuff done for not a lot of money. However, what they do offer on Fiverr also is pretty much unlimited fake traffic. I took this screenshot probably a couple of years ago, and the screen's a little small here, what I'm working off here, but I believe there are about, 500 or 600 hits for fake traffic. I went back and checked maybe 3 weeks ago to see if they were still selling fake traffic on Fiverr. And the number of options had doubled. I think it was over 1,000 options now to purchase fake traffic and run through a website. Now, I'm sure that the quality of this traffic varies greatly, and I wouldn't necessarily trust the reviews for this, but a lot of these, when I did check the reviews, were very highly reviewed, saying yes, this brought all kinds of traffic to my website. I don't think everyone realizes this is fake traffic. There's probably a lot of people who thought that this was genuinely someone who could bring 200,000 humans to their website, which is not the case for $10. But people will believe what they want to believe. But it's very easy to go out there and get that fake traffic. So a number of initiatives over the years have kind of come out to address this concern. One of the best things that came out of the initial days of digital ad fraud, or maybe the last 5 years of digital ad fraud, is Adstxt. Many of AAM's clients use Adstxt. This is it's essentially a page, it's a whitelist or an inclusion list that publishers use to say, okay, here is who can sell our digital advertising inventory, and here's who can resell our digital advertising inventory. So it removes the ability to spoof your inventory and have bad actors claim they're selling it when they're really just selling spoofed inventory. What happened was, and this is how clever digital ad fraud is, there were a group of bad guys that actually went out there and targeted folks with ads.txt files. The longer, the better for them. And what they would do is they would contact these resellers, some of these resellers on here, and they would say, hey, I want to resell what you're reselling. Just sell it to me and I'll resell it out into the environment also. They would say, yeah, sure, why not? It's more people selling, everybody's making money on this, why not? So then they would say, okay, well, go ahead and get me on that ads.txt list as a reseller then, and then I can be, then I'll be included and, I'll be purchasing traffic through you, but then I'm on this inclusion list and and we can all sell the traffic. What they were doing, however, is they were setting up illegitimate websites on the side meant to look like that website. And then once they got listed as a reseller of traffic for that website, they were then just using that spoofed website, and they were just churning out traffic through the spoofed website. So they were making money then on that spoofed website, claiming to be a reseller of the legitimate traffic. This was caught pretty early on, thankfully, by Double Verify. So, but it's a good example. You're looking for takeaways with this particular webinar. One that is an immediate takeaway. If you don't have an ads.txt file, get one. Pretty much everybody does now, but if you don't, you need to have an ads.txt file. If you do have an ads.txt file, be vigilant with it. That's easier said than done, because we all have, staff turnover, or you set up your ads.txt file and then you have a dozen other things that your staff needs to concern themselves with, and that ads.txt file kind of ages out. It doesn't become 100% match with who you're working with. And then you end up with these vulnerabilities that can happen. And you should also, when you're creating these contracts with these digital sellers and resellers, you should also have a clause in there that only allows a maximum of a one-hop relationship for these sellers, meaning that if you're contracting with a reseller, you have it in the contract that the reseller cannot resell that traffic again. They have to go out and sell it. They can't sell it to another seller, because that's where these problems occur. I know that's kind of like complicated, but it closes a loophole. It could cost you a lot of money, and it could create, it could make you a victim of digital ad fraud, a direct victim of digital ad fraud. Now, even large advertisers have not been immune to digital ad fraud. This is one of my favorite examples of how crazy digital ad fraud is. If you'll remember when Uber first came out, and this was probably about, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when they first started reaching critical mass, their ads were all over the internet. They were everywhere, if you'll remember. And they were everywhere because they came up with a very innovative way to advertise digitally. They weren't paying for impressions or per thousands of impressions. What they were doing is they were able to serve those impressions for free, but they would give publishers a bounty, a much higher amount of money, if that publisher was responsible for creating an end user for. So say I'm on the Chicago Tribune's website and I see an ad for Uber. I click on it. It sends me to the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. I download Uber. In a lot of cases, that would trigger the bounty, and then the Chicago Tribune would get a much higher rate off of that advertisement than they would have before. Or Uber was even waiting until the first ride. So I would take my first ride, and then Uber would pay even more money, sometimes double what they would pay for the install, if someone would put in their credit card information and go for a ride. That was all done with a breadcrumb, and it was called attribution. So they would, on that particular ad, they would drop a breadcrumb that would then say that the Chicago Tribune was responsible for me downloading the app, or me hopping in a Uber and getting home from a party. And they would then, that publisher would then get that bounty. So when you put that kind of CPM or that kind of bounty out there, that much richer target environment, the bad guys caught on to that really quick. And what they started doing is they just started seeding the internet with breadcrumbs, Uber breadcrumbs. So they would create pop-up ads that maybe you get on your mobile phone. And when you try to click the X to get out of it, it would drop a breadcrumb. Or if you just accidentally clicked on a website or one of those clickbait websites, it would have those breadcrumbs all over it. So everywhere that you went, you were getting exposed to these Uber breadcrumbs, because they wanted then in 4 months down the road, you're at a party, and just through word of mouth, hey, I got to get home. Hey, try this, get an Uber. The taxis are not good around here. So you download Uber, and then whatever that first breadcrumb is, that's the quote unquote publisher that would get credit for that particular download. Even though they had nothing to do with it, they were just the first ones to get a breadcrumb onto your device that downloaded Uber. How much did this cost? In the lawsuit that Uber filed against their mobile agency, they alleged $100 million. One company, $100 million. And the only reason Uber even found out about this was brand safety, something that was pretty much unrelated to, they didn't sit down and say, hey, we need to look for ad fraud. What they were doing is Uber ads, because they were so prevalent on the internet, they were showing up on some websites that they shouldn't have been on, that they were not brand safe environments. They weren't brand neutral environments. So there's a Twitter campaign kind of started up of like boycott Uber, and it started to gain some steam. So Uber, of course, wanted to, they want to make sure they were in a brand safe environment. So they started to, it forced them to take a deeper look at their traffic. When they took a deeper look at their traffic, they saw some pretty horrific things. The install times for the app were suspicious. It wasn't a bell curve. They were seeing spikes in weird areas. When they were tracking that attribution, it was all over the map. They really, once they got down into the granularity of their reporting, they were able to see where they could tell that almost none of the bounties that they were paying were organic and natural. So they sued their mobile agency because their mobile agency, and this is all allegedly, even though Uber just won this lawsuit. I'll just say allegedly. The mobile agency kind of allegedly knew what was happening and went along with it because they were making their money doing it this way, and they didn't want to change it. And then when Uber started questioning them about it, the mobile agency started allegedly changing the reports that they were providing to Uber to make it look like the problems that were occurring weren't occurring. They were forging a lot of documents. Now, like I said, Uber just won this lawsuit. They didn't win it for $100 million. I think they maybe won it for $6 million. So they had to eat the other $94 million in this particular case. But it's an interesting story nonetheless. And it's a fascinating example of the lengths that the bad actors will go to in order to capture this digital ad fraud. That would probably, the Uber example would probably make a good Netflix documentary. If there are any Netflix producers on this call, there you go. There's your win for the day. Let's talk about CTV for a minute because a lot of the money is flowing there. Now I know you might not be directly involved in CTV, but you're still being victimized by digital advertising fraud in this environment because, as I said earlier, every dollar that is lost to digital ad fraud in all the different ways that digital ad fraud occurs, that's money that should be going to quality publishers. That should be going, if you kind of look at the internet as a spectrum, from the absolute worst part of the internet, which is 100% fraud, to the highest quality portion of the internet, the highest human percentage on the internet. Chances are that your news media organizations are going to be at the highest quality end of this because of the amount of money and effort that you put into driving human traffic multiple times a day to your website. The rest of the internet, the mid and long tail, they don't have that kind of cost burden that you do. CTV, connected televisions, if you have a Roku or a Fire Stick, you can download screensaver apps. So when you're not using any of your particular apps and you didn't turn your TV off for whatever reason, it can just kick into a screensaver, and it can be something different than like what the default Roku screensaver is. There was one app in particular that was downloaded multiple thousands, maybe tens of thousands of times, where it would serve a screensaver, but the purpose of the app was to commit digital ad fraud. Behind the scenes, it didn't show up on the television. It was just basically exploiting the processors that you have. It would serve fake ad impressions, video ad impressions through your device, through your Roku or your Fire Stick. They didn't specify which one. It might have been both, I don't know. But so even when the television was off, that app was still firing out millions and millions of ad impressions per hour, the video ad impressions. So it was getting that video ad impression CPM. This was caught as it cost millions and millions of dollars to further kind of drive home the point of how absurd ad fraud is right now, or just digital advertising fraud. While I was looking up that story, that CTV story, because I wanted to kind of get more of the background of it, so that we could discuss it in a webinar like this. I noticed that the second search result for it was a weird website I'd never heard of. I'm from the Chicago. AAM is based in the Chicago suburbs. That's the area I was born and raised in. I'm a self-professed news junkie. The second hit for that particular CTV ad fraud instance was from a website called Illinois News Today, which immediately kind of raised my eyebrows. I've never heard of that website before. Illinois isn't really the type of state where it serves news on a state level. There's Chicago proper, there's the suburbs, and then there's downstate. And the three don't really, people downstate don't really care about suburban news and vice versa. So this Illinois News Today kind of caught my attention. So I clicked on it. And this was a number 2 result for that particular story. And this website essentially just scrapes content from quality publishers, plagiarizes it, puts it on their website, and then serves a mountain of ads in the meantime. So you can see one of AAM's clients. I already talked to this particular client, showed them this example a couple of weeks ago. Their content, their reporter, their story, their infrastructure, then this Illinois News Today just goes out, steals the content, puts it on their website, and sells all kinds of advertising behind it. Now, we're not under the hood on Illinois News Today, so I don't know if they're using fake traffic at all for this. I know they don't have content sharing agreements, at least with the clients that I spoke to, and probably not with any of these websites that they're stealing content from. In fact, maybe some of you might be losing content to this website or hundreds of other websites that might exist that are just like it. They're out there and they're easy to find if you know kind of what you're looking for. And unfortunately, they're directly victimizing news media companies in a lot of different ways, sometimes as brazenly as this. I checked out the website registration for this. It's registered to a town in India, and it was registered, I believe, December of 2020. So it's a brand new website. So it's almost like playing whack-a-mole with a lot of this. Who is this individual and why is he on your computer screen right now? And why is he wearing that goofy shirt? This is Alexander Zhukov. He will hold a place in history because he is the only, or at least the first, human to ever be convicted of digital ad fraud. He is the only person to be convicted of digital ad fraud. He was the mastermind behind a ad fraud scheme called MethBot. What MethBot did is it created about 6,000 bogus domains. They were spoofed. They were spoofs of high quality websites. And their sole purpose was to house video advertisements, and then they ran 500,000 bots, human-looking bots, through those websites to serve video ads to them, and then collect the money that was being harvested from serving all those advertisements. They were serving up to 300 million video ads a day with this particular, those 500,000 bots, they were quote unquote watching up to 300 million video ads a day. They were grossing between $500,000 and $4 million a day doing this. Now, when they caught him, he had $7 million. He had the bad luck of doing this from a country. A lot of this is happening over in Eastern Europe, in China, Russia. It's a lot of places that don't have extradition to the United States. He happened to be doing this from a country that did or does have extradition to the United States. So the federal government was able to work with some tech companies and identify who was behind it and actually identify the individuals. And the man hours involved in catching this and catching the people involved, especially when they end up being from countries that you can't extradite from, is enormous. But in this particular case, they did get one bad guy. And again, he remains the only person to be convicted of digital ad fraud. He called himself the king of fraud. And his lawyer presented the defense that, yes, I was serving bots, and no, it's not illegal. Show me in the book of laws where what I was doing is patently illegal. Now, fortunately, he was convicted for this, but that's how brazen he was with this particular act. Of course, when there's this type of fraud happening, advertisers are going to take notice, and they have. Despite the record amount of digital advertising revenue that's going out there, larger advertisers like, for example, Chase, they're taking notice. And again, this was something that was a brand safety issue. Chase ran into the exact same problem that Uber had. They were showing up on too many websites. They were showing up on controversial websites. And there was the threat of boycott Chase. So they went into their analytics and they were appearing on 400,000 websites, which is what they wanted. They wanted as much reach as possible into the web and into people's eyeballs. But only 3% of those 400,000 websites had resulted in a click-through, which is that's not incredibly low in click-through terms, but when you're advertising on 400,000 websites and you're trying to be brand safe, what they did is they took those 12,000 websites, and since it's Chase and they have an army of interns, they turned those interns loose on those 12,000 websites, and they said, go to every one of these websites and verify that they're brand safe. So out of those 12,000 websites, only 5,000 came back as brand safe. So they made the decision, okay, we're going to cut down our digital ad spend from 400,000 websites to 5,000 websites. They did it and they kind of crossed their fingers because they didn't know what would happen. they had the impact on their business results was zero. It had no negative impact on their business results at all. It's a 99% reduction in reach, had no impact on their business outcome at all. Another large company, Procter & Gamble, all those products there, they all advertise online, they all advertise everywhere. They did the same thing. They took a look at their ad spend and they cut $200 million from digital ad spend. They didn't cut it completely out of advertising. They just cut it out of digital. They did cut back some, but a lot of it kind of got sprinkled out into the other forms of advertising. But they did cut $200 million from digital ad spend. And what they saw was that their reach increased by 10%. By cutting $200 million from their ad spend, they increased their reach 10%. And a lot of it is for the reasons that we just went through. So because of this, I think everybody gets the point that ad fraud is rampant, and there are a number of different flavors of ad fraud. The ANA came to us, the Association of National Advertisers, came to AAM and asked us to help provide a solution to the marketplace. Now, the reason why the ANA and AAM had this conversation is because there's a little bit of AAM trivia here. The ANA created the Alliance for Audited Media over 100 years ago. And they created AAM because they wanted to distinguish quality publishers from everybody else. And the ANA, knowing this, said, well, wait a second, this is the exact same thing we need in the digital marketplace that we created for all the other ways that media companies distribute and reach their audience. This is just as applicable, if not more relevant now to digital than it was to print when we started when we started AAM as an industry nonprofit over 100 years ago. So we set to work to develop a way to distinguish quality publishers. And what the digital publisher audit does is it differentiates quality news media publishers and digital publishers in general, pure plays also, from everybody else on the internet. Now you say, well, we're obviously not a fraudulent website. You can take a look at us and you know we're not a fraudulent website. The problem is that's not just the problem. The problem is that there are fraudulent websites out there that are stealing all kinds of money, but there's also legitimate websites that include source traffic, that includes invalid traffic. And they may not even know that invalid traffic is included. And there are plenty of websites that do know that they have that a portion of their traffic is invalid traffic, and they're still allowing it. And advertisers are sick of that, and they want a way to distinguish, and they want a way to partner with quality publishers that have a third-party verified way of knowing that the audience is highly human and is a quality audience. So we started the digital publisher audit. Digital publisher audit is essentially three components. There is a business process review, which all the other ad fraud solutions that are out there, none of those really involve a team of auditors that sit down with your staff and run through best practices, learn about which third parties you're working with, where there might be vulnerabilities, taking a look at your filters to make sure that your traffic filters are set properly, and really just taking a look at your overall your digital business plan and what you're doing there. So there's a business process review that our digital auditors conduct. We also do a quantitative look at your traffic, which is, that's the numbers. For many of you, that's Google Analytics and making sure that your Google Analytics are correct, making sure that your website is tagged properly, which many of our clients are not tagged properly when we go into the engagement, and a qualitative look at your traffic as well to verify that there is a high degree of humanness to your traffic as well. What we found is, the digital publisher audit, we're not going into the marketplace with the digital publisher audit saying that this is the end all be all and this is going to eliminate all types of ad fraud. What we're saying is this fits into a suite of services that needs to be adopted by publishers and advertisers alike, because if you follow these steps in particular, if you follow these best practices, it's going to cut out a vast majority of the bad guys, and it's going to make it far too difficult for them to acquire those fraudulent dollars, and they're going to start looking someplace else. So there's a number of things that publishers and advertisers can do to really kind of layer up and close the holes and make it so that the digital advertising environment is much more brand safe and much cleaner traffic with much more valid traffic. One of those things is supporting industry best practices through tag. That's extremely important. And then those ads.txt files and seller.json files that I mentioned before, make sure those are current, make sure you're doing that. Make sure that you are using MRC accredited technology as your business partners. And then also, if you're a quality publisher and you want to be acknowledged as a quality publisher, work with AAM to get that designation and be included on AAM's inclusion list the advertisers use to purchase advertising off of. I like the Swiss cheese model, because it's one layer Swiss cheese, still a lot of holes, 2 layers, still holes, so we're not saying 4 layers of Swiss cheese is the perfect amount of Swiss cheese, but the more layers you put on there, the less holes you have until you get to a point where the holes are a minimal part of it. These are some of the clients that we worked with to develop the digital publisher audit. We have a number more participants in there. One cool thing, since we've had digital publisher audit for a while now, and we've worked with our clients for a while on it, we have a number of learnings from these clients that we've worked with. This is the first time I've shown this slide in a presentation for this, so I'm pretty excited to bring this out here. Had a big, long discussion with our digital audit team and just, basically picked their brains and said, okay, what are you learning from working with our clients? What are we seeing out there from digital publisher audits that the larger audience that isn't participating yet that they should know? Some pretty important takeaways are that AAM auditors fill a very important role that many current clients, they don't have. It's critical work for a client, analyzing the traffic, and we're able to do it at a fraction of the cost of a full-time employee. We found that most, not all, but most of our clients have their traffic filters set up incorrectly, meaning that they're allowing invalid traffic from a number of sources that they're not even aware of until we bring it to their attention. We can do that because our auditors know how to peel back the onion on Google Analytics. This has become harder over the years, especially lately, because what Google did, this is a little inside baseball, but it is germane to this part of the conversation, so I want to bring it up and talk about it. Google deprecated 2 dimensions of their Google Analytics reporting. They peel back service provider and network domain. Now, they didn't do this assumingly for any nefarious purpose or anything. They're not trying to aid and abet ad fraud or invalid traffic. They did it for likely, I'm assuming, for privacy concerns, because privacy is becoming more and more, moving more and more to the forefront of the digital discussion also. So Google, trying to get ahead of it, said, okay, we're going to remove a couple of identifying features from Google Analytics. But the unintended consequence of that is it makes it more difficult for Google Analytics users to identify their traffic and to identify invalid traffic and separate it from valid traffic. And what we've seen just in my discussing and chatting with all of our clients is you are all using analytics more than you ever have before. And you're using it to make business decisions. So if you're not using valid traffic, you're not getting valid business decisions from that. We have so many clients who are basing a lot of their business decisions off of what gets clicks, what gets dwell time, what genre of story gets what type of engagement. If you are including invalid traffic in that analysis, you might end up making some bad decisions off of that. And participating in the digital publisher audit allows for us to take a look at that with you and work with you to sort that out and make sure that you are using valid traffic. One other benefit for the digital publisher audit, since we've kind of moved out of the release phase and we're working with more and more clients on this, we just got done working with the IAB Tech Lab. We are the first company to be included in the compliance registry. So that's fantastic. You can kind of see in this screen, you can see some of the publishers that we're currently working with in digital publisher audit. And we now have more than 100 audited sites on there, and that compliance registry is another single source of actionable industry information. It's another place where advertisers go first to look for quality publishers. So AAM is now, our clients are now listed there as well. And also, understanding the current state of news media This isn't something, you know, obviously we can go out and everyone has a pocket full of money that they can hand over for something like this. So what we've done is we've created a acceleration program. Current AAM clients can participate in the digital publisher audit for 12 months at no cost. So that means you get 12 months of that analysis. You get 12 months of verification, 12 months of being able to go to advertisers and say, you can trust our audience completely because we have a third party who is verifying it. Good luck getting that in the rest of the internet. So it gives you an opportunity for a full year participate and learn all about the value of the digital publisher audit without actually having to go out of pocket. That's for current AAM clients. However, of course, we can work with any quality digital publisher, anyone who wants to go ahead with this. So really, you know, just to conclude things, digital publisher audit, it's a good way to provide an internal check for your staff. It can provide essentially the services of a fraction of a full-time employee at a fraction of the cost of a full-time employee. It gives you an opportunity to go into the marketplace with an extra arrow in your quivers for your sales staff to be able to go out there and say that you have a quality audience, that you have the highest quality audience on the internet. And ultimately, that's a way to increase revenue, which is really, I'm assuming that's why everybody sat on this call and you know, gave me the opportunity to talk with you for the last 45 minutes. So really, you know, that opportunity to increase revenue, we're really excited to be able to bring this to everybody. So with that, I want to say, you know, thank you. I've been kind of focusing on the slides, so I haven't really been looking at the questions in the chat too much, but you know, hopefully we've had some good discussion, some good chats there too.
Thank you, Kevin. I think we probably have time for one question. So what are some best practices for avoiding fraud?
Yes, the best practices. Really, I'm going to go back to, since I'm still sharing the slides here, I'm going to go back to that Swiss cheese slide. There we go. This slide in particular, you know, really these are four big ones there. And really, I would say that the biggest recommendation from my seat, outside of participating in the digital publisher audit, is make sure that you're using MRC accredited technology, tech partners with your organization. That's a big one. And also, you know, I have to reiterate Adstxt files. Please don't just set those out on the internet and forget about it. Watch it, maintain it, make sure that is part of someone in your IT department's regular job to check on that. You know, and it's really, it's for quality publishers, it's a pretty simple equation. You have to identify yourselves as quality publishers. And I know you're getting attacked at all angles right now. There are 100 different ways that people are nipping at your heels and chipping away at your revenue. And this is one area that you have that, you know, I would much rather be in local media right now than in television or in radio. Those are two sectors that are getting absolutely demolished by the internet, and I don't really see a way around it. However, news media, you are the news. You are creating content that you're not just reselling content or displaying content. You are creating the content, and you're the fourth estate for your community. So you have an advantage that you need to take advantage. You need to take more advantage of this. We need to get away from the quantity-driven digital ad marketplace and into a quality-driven ad marketplace.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for Alliance for Audited Media for being here with us today. Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. As we said, you will be receiving a follow-up email directly from AAM. So with that, I will say have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on a future LMA webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.